Well, by now we have completed most of the key pieces of our game. Now we're going to just do a little bit of cleaning up and polishing of the game. We're going to start off by adding some sound effects to make things a bit more interesting for the player. We're going to add a wall sound, block sound, catch sound, lost sound, big leg sound, and click sound. I won't do all of these in the video lesson, but I'll show you one of them to show you how it's done, a reminder of how it's done since you've done this already in the past. So what I'm going to do is go to, first we're going to go to our pop object, and we're going to play the wall sound when we have our pop object collide with the wall. So I'm going to the collision with the wall event. We've already got the bounce action, and I'm just going to add a sound here, and it will be the wall sound with the loop set to false. So go ahead yourself and following along what's in the book, add collision to your collisions, the appropriate sounds for each of them. Okay, I've added sound effects all throughout. We've got a sound effect for catch and for our blocks, for our double blocks, and our split block will use the same sound as our regular block. And I've also got a sound effect when we have a collision between our big leg object and our pop object, and then we already had sounds built in when the player pressed any of the buttons on the main room screen. Next, let's set things up so that we can save the game. If you remember, our front room of the game has a load button, and so in order to have something to load, we need to set up a save game. So let's do that now. Open up your controller object, and we're going to add an event. It's going to be a key press event. And we're going to select a letter this time, and we'll select the letter S for save. And then we'll do a save game action. And you can just leave the file name the default name. We'll also include a display message action, and we'll just let the player know we've saved it. So we'll say game saved in all caps. You'll also want to include information in the game information window about how to save the game. In this case, with the file I've put up on the course website, that information has already been included. Next, we're going to change the way the escape key works. For building the game, it's good to have the escape key let us just exit out of the entire program. But when the player is actually playing the game, we'd like it to work so that if they hit the escape key, it will bring them back to that front room. So we'll need to go into our global game settings, and we'll need to make sure that we disable under the Other tab, Let Escape End the Game. We're going to turn that off. That way it'll not work, and instead we'll set it up so that it takes them back to the first room. Once you've turned or deselected the Let Escape End the Game, let's go back to our controller object, add a new event, key press, others, and escape, and we'll set up the escape functionality here. And the functionality is going to be to go to a different room, and the room that we want to go to is going to be the front end room. Just a couple more things we're going to do to clean up our game. I'm going to go back briefly and look at my global game settings. And we'll go to Other, and remember we just deselected the Let Escape End the Game key, so that because we're going to have our own quit button, and we'll be using that as well. So instead, when they hit escape, we'll bring them back to the main room so they can quit from there. In a similar way, we're going to deselect, if it isn't deselected already, the option to let the F5 key save the game and the F6 key load a game For the same exact reason, we've got our load and save buttons in the main room, and we want to use those instead of using the F5 and F6 keys. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tweak the game a little bit. Right now, when the player starts a given level, the second they enter that level, the pop game character begins falling down toward catch. And it doesn't give the player any time to even pay any attention to where that object is falling, so it makes the game a little more difficult. Therefore, we're going to create a duplicate version of the pop character that is stationary. We'll set an alarm clock on it, and then after the alarm clock runs down to 0, we will change that stationary version of pop into the normal version of pop, and it will then start to fall. So it just gives the player a little bit of time to notice what's going on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to create a new object. Call it obj_pop. We'll set its depth to 10. We'll add a create event. And we're going to set an alarm. And we'll set the alarm to 30 steps, which is 1 second. And we'll just leave it to alarm 0. Then we're going to add an alarm. And alarm 0. And we're going to include a change instance action. And we're going to set the instance into our pop object. And we're going to perform the events that we've already attached to that pop object to make sure that it starts moving appropriately when it gets created on the screen. Alright, we'll save that. Then we're going to go back into our pop object, and we're going to take a look at our outside room event. And we've got our create instance here, and instead of creating the pop object, we'll create the one that we just made, which is the pop object start. All right. One more thing we need to do is go back to our start pop object and make sure we give it a sprite. Let's pop sprite. Okay. Save that. And we'll go into our rooms. We've got our test room. And what we need to do here is get rid of the pop object and replace it with the start pop object. And any rooms that you've already created up to this point, to get the benefit of that new pause we've got, we need to replace the existing pop object with the start pop object. That's it. There are a couple more things that the chapter talks about, mainly adding in some special key actions to allow the player to move back and forth between the rooms, but we don't actually want to do that, or I'm not going to do it anyway. So we'll do a final check of our game to make sure everything's working. Here we are. We start our game. You'll see that the pop object pauses briefly, and it starts after a second, so it gives the player a chance to see where it is, which makes the game not quite so challenging, which is good. Okay, everything seems to be working right. That is your assignment, to go through and build the entire game for Chapter 6. Take a look at the assignment information on the Blackboard site. We'll add some challenging extra credit options. So look on the Blackboard site to see what those are. So get in, start building, and have fun.